I was 8 years old. Unexpectedly, on a hot June day at a softball field, I had a seizure out of the blue. They called for an ambulance. I was rushed to the hospital. Doctors did multiple types of tests. Had one at a birthday party. So you get this sense that your parents are walking around, well, is Jonathan going to fall out with something? At 20 years old, I started having seizures on a massive scale, 2 to 4 within the space of 6 weeks. We next looked to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, and they felt like if they could get a collection of data that would show where the seizures are originating, that they could go in and possibly cut those areas out, which would preempt the seizures. That was their theory. I found a consistent pattern, and people were saying, Jonathan, you're going to go up there in perfect peace. And I can remember one lady, an aunt of a friend of mine, told me that, and I know for a fact within her congregation they don't believe that God works that way anymore. And she was saying the same word over me, the exact same word, as was given to a brother of mine that's a Pentecostal pastor in Africa who I spoke with. So I went up there with this sense of confidence. I went up there with a sense of peace. But right when I had the procedure done, and they go in and they crack my skull and they expose my brain, and they place electrodes on my brain, that's when all hell broke out and my life was in jeopardy. And so you can imagine what my parents were going through and what the doctors were going through. There was a lot of panic, there was a lot of fear. You know, I'd been sent up there with this message of peace, and then when you have the procedure done and then everything goes 180 degrees and nobody seems to have any peace. And I can remember my father and telling me of just how much they prayed during that time and the intensity of the prayer that they uttered. It was something they'd never experienced before, and they'd faced bankruptcy, they'd faced the loss of a child. And people were praying for me all over the world. I remember stories of folks in Nigeria, folks in Australia. I couldn't communicate at that time, and it looked like my odds of recovery were virtually nil. And the doctors were trying to get me out of the institution as quickly as they could. So if these people didn't have the answer to it, then nobody did. God began a miraculous process over a period of 3 days to where I slowly regained the use of my speech, my cognitive faculties returned. I moved to Washington, D.C. I've lived an independent life. I worked up on Capitol Hill for 2.5 years. At Emory, I'm studying Hebrew, Russian history, Russian literature. That's kind of a pastime for me. And I've been seizure-free now for 15 years. The Lord did a mighty work.